No, I'm wrapping up. Oh, is it time for a coffee break? Well, alrighty then, I am prepared. Whoa, hello everybody, Bruce Naylor here. Welcome to Coffee Break, and I am the Boomer Consumer. I'm an audio enthusiast. I like to review hi-fi gear. I like to talk about all things digital, analog, music, gear, the whole nine yards, including vintage as well. And I thought today's episode would be a bit fun because I was talking to a friend who was getting back into hi-fi after being out of it for many, many years. And of course, we got into a discussion about things like his budget, the room size, but most importantly, what sources is he going to really spend most of his time listening to? Is he going to be a vinyl guy? Is he going to be a digital guy? Is he going to do streaming? What is it that you want to do? And so we were kind of talking about the pros and cons. Yes, it's possible to build a rig around all sources of music, but he's on a budget, and predominantly he's going to listen to vinyl. I think so. That's kind of what we ended up talking about. The real question I have for you, the rig that you have, what sounds better to you, vinyl or analog? Now, when we say analog, that could mean vinyl for sure, but it also means tape, whether it's reel-to-reel or cassette. Now, look, I love my cassettes, but it's strictly for nostalgia and just for the fun of it. I would never claim that, although if you have the right deck and the right tape and the right, you know what you're doing, you can get pretty doggone close to CD quality out of, like the Nakamichi Dragon or whatever, but that's beside the point. Now, when we say better, that really depends on a number of factors, okay? Such as, the sound quality, how convenient it is, your budget, your personal taste, all these things come into effect when we say better. Not necessarily fidelity-wise, but you get the point. Personal taste, that's, I think, the biggest one. So you know what? After watching this video, you might be surprised by which one of these fits your setup the best. So hopefully, I broke this down into several categories and that we can discuss each one. And the first one is, let's talk about sound quality, particularly vinyl. And I've got a pretty good vinyl collection, mostly classic rock from the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. But I think at times the albums that I have recorded in the 60s or 70s, I think the vinyl records actually sound a little bit better to me than when they're on CD. That's not always the case, but if you think about it, these were recorded to analog tape. They were mastered to go on to vinyl, and then they were, of course, cut into vinyl. So it was an analog chain all the way through. So that is the way, at least, is kind of intended to hear it, was on vinyl. In order for you to play vinyl, what do you got to have? You got to have a turntable. You got to have the right cartridge. You got to have the right tone arm. You got to have all this stuff. Not to mention a good phono preamp, and of course, nice, good condition records in order to enjoy that sound. So there's quite a bit to it. And then if you think about just maintaining that, right? The effort you have to put into cleaning the records, you have to also make sure that, the stylus is clean. There's a lot of things that can alternate and change that sound quality, especially the cartridge. That's a big one right there. And then the phono preamp. I like vinyl particularly for classic rock, jazz, and maybe a little bit of the blues. Now, if you talk about digital, what most people are going to say, I think, is that it sounds clean. There's no clicks, pops, any kind of surface noise. And I would think that the sound quality is kind of consistent among a bunch of different recordings. But detailed, clean sound. That is, I think, what most people are going to think about digital. Sometimes the formats, as far as fidelity is concerned, if you take high-res, Qobuz, Tidal, you're getting fidelity that's probably greater than what's on vinyl for sure. So, in a nutshell, vinyl has more character to it, where digital, I think, is going to be described as more detailed. Maybe some people even say clinical, but I say it's more detailed. Let's talk about setup, fiddliness, and if your thing is going to be vinyl, as well as I, and of course, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not suggesting that at all. In fact, some people really, really enjoy the whole, the whole thing of the whole part of vinyl, the ritual. That's the word I'm looking for. But turntables require very precise things to happen to get the best sound of them. That tracking force has got to be dead on. The azimuth of the stylus has to be just so. Proper alignment of the cartridge is critical. The type of cartridge you select is critical. The tone arm is critical. Then there's your anti-skate. You have to have that set just right. So there's a lot of mechanics that have to be done just so in order to get the very best sound out of a turntable. Bottom line is, these are a lot more maintenance intensive than a CD player. In fact, you can pick up a really cheap CD player and it's going to sound pretty good. And you're not going to have to make that big of an investment. But when you start talking vinyl and a really good turntable and good cartridge and all that, and a good preamp, you're looking at a pretty serious spend there. Yes, you can get used, and yes, you can do this and that. But I'm just talking if you were going out buying brand new everything. Yeah, you're going to be able to get into CDs a lot cheaper than you would be vinyl. But again, CD digital may not be your thing. So, with digital, it's pretty much plug and play. You get a DAC, an amp, speakers, and off you go. Streamer. You can use your phone, a lot of things, Bluetooth, however you want to do it. Streaming's a lot easier to get going and a lot less hassle. Digital, I should say. A lot less hassle, a lot less maintenance involved, and it's more convenient. So, bottom line, digital is much more convenient, etc., whereas vinyl is much more maintenance in storage and cost. Yeah, records ain't cheap these days. More intensive. And speaking of cost, I mean, vinyl, when you're doing analog, and you're doing, especially with vinyl, those costs are going to add up quick. All right. Turntables, I mean, I've seen, we won't even go about the audiophile jewelry, $300,000 turntables and $50,000 cartridges. But, I mean, you can get a good starter turntable for, I don't know, what, $400 to $500 as a starter turntable. That's still a pretty significant investment. But if you really want better sound from your vinyl, you're going to need to spend quite a bit more for better cartridges, again, better tone arms, etc. And of course, a more premium preamp for the turntable. So, I mean, I've seen just crazy money on these things. And yeah, there's some CD players out there that have crazy money for. But generally speaking, if you're building a rig focused on vinyl, be prepared to shell out some bucks for that stuff. When you get started with digital, if you're looking at DACs, you can get a decent little DAC for under $100. Yeah, it's incredible the values are out there. Even these $100 to $200 little Chinese-made DACs do a phenomenal job and measure extremely well if you're in the measurements. I want to do a whole episode just about DACs in the very near future, and we can talk a little bit about that. I'd like to get your opinion down below. Do all DACs really, do you really gain that much by paying thousands for a DAC over a few $100? That's the question. That's a big question for maybe the next coffee break. And of course, streaming services, they're dirt cheap for the price. Less than, well, actually twice as cheap as a new vinyl record or more. You can get a monthly subscription to, say, Tidal, Qobuz, Apple Music, and then you got access to, 100 million songs out there. It's absolutely insane. Just about all the recorded music known to man is available on these streaming services. But it is true, you don't own them, you're just renting them. So if you quit the streaming service, that music goes away. But you know what I think the biggest thing is? It's the listening experience, right? If you like the ritual of cleaning a record, putting it on the turntable, dropping the needle, sitting back and listening to an entire side or both sides of an album start to finish, then you need to build your rig around that thought in your listening room and so forth. With digital, it's instant gratification, right? Not only that, it lends itself particularly well to things like doing multi-room streaming, for example. Skipping over songs or whatever, just listening to the hits of the best part, now moving on to the next one. I think in my particular case, it's all about using digital for background music or to discover new music, and then getting myself physical media. So the key point is vinyl is kind of planned like an event or something, sitting down and listening to your records, whereas digital is just more of a lifestyle, I think, for some people. Lifestyle thing. It's just much more convenient, instantly accessible, and not so ritualistic. Another point I want to make is just personal taste, right? Some people really enjoy the warmth of vinyl and they don't mind the surface noise. The pops and clicks are just part of the ritual. The cleaning's part of the ritual. And this is their personal taste. Whereas digital, they might prefer the more detailed, maybe the wider dynamics of CDs and digital over vinyl. There's really no winner between the two. It's whatever works best for you. What's better for your setup? Well, if you're not audiophile, you got a ton of money and time, vinyl might be the way to go. If you just want maximum convenience and, again, maybe fidelity, we can argue about that. But detail, then digital might be the way to go. That would sound best on your rig. But I want to hear from you in the comments down below. Bruce Naylor, the Boomer Consumer. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.